Welcome to
Tamarindo Podcast.
Hosted by me, Brenda Gonzalez, a fitness coach, political nerd, and nonprofit capacity builder.
And me, Delcy Sandoval, a Guatemalan-American licensed therapist and passionate creativity advocate. Together, we're here to uplift our community through powerful conversations with changemakers, creatives, and healers.
Each week on the pod, we talk politics, culture, and personal development. Listeners call Tamarindo the Advocacy and Self-Love Podcast. Vámonos! Let's start the show. Yeah, this is so great. So you are the producer of Las Culturistas, and you were recently a guest on the show. And this is how I learned that both your parents are Puerto Rican, but you mostly grew up in Texas. You grew up in Texas.
Yes.
So we want to know, what is your version of ni de aquí, ni de allá as a Puerto Rican American?
Yeah, I would say my version of ni de aquí ni de allá is being a Puerto Rican, not only having grown up in Texas, but not speaking Spanish and also identifying as Afro-Latina because growing up, being so dark-skinned, being like black hair, curly hair, and obviously I look different on this Zoom, but if I had pictures of myself growing up as a kid, I was like 8 shades darker than this. My hair was much more coily. Um, I think when you're in Texas versus now I live in New York City, so I get pale in the winter, but it's sun all year round. So I was definitely more like Afro-Latina presenting growing up, and I do think that made me stand out not only within the Latin community in Texas, but also within my family. My parents, I would say in comparison to me, are fairly fair-skinned, and my brother too. My brother has like light brown hair and lighter eyes and it is a fair complexion. And so just growing up, I already felt out of place with my family. And people are out of pocket. Kids, they're mean and they say things to you and they say you're adopted and they say you don't look like your parents and yada, yada, yada. Even adult women would say things to my mother and be like, "Oh, well, is your husband the same father of your daughter as your son?" Which it's like, would you say that to a white woman? Who knows? It's just it was very clear from my life growing up that I was othered and I also was othered within my family in a way. Not that my parents made me feel othered, but it was clear. Like I looked at myself and was like, well, I don't belong here and I don't belong here. And I also have kids telling me, well, you don't speak Spanish, so you don't belong with us. So I was like, well, where do I belong? I know I'm Puerto Rican because my mom is such a proud Puerto Rican woman. I grew up in a very Latin home. I would say like the doors within the walls of my home felt very brown. But then I walked in the world, and at the end of the day, I'm in Texas, I'm listening to country music, I'm listening to Beyonce, I'm, going to public school. It was a very different environment. So it wasn't until I moved to New York where I felt more comfortable and less like I lived in these two worlds. But I would say most of my life, I really felt like I was straddling this dual world of Latin in my home, but not outside of it.
Mm-hmm. And thanks so much for sharing that. I think a lot of our listeners can really relate to that experience. And I think they're also listening about your Puerto Rican heritage. And I think everybody's thinking, what did you think? What did you feel when you learned that Bad Bunny would be performing at the upcoming halftime show for the Super Bowl? Let's talk about
Honestly,
that.
it was such an interesting feeling because it was like after watching his year, 2025, it almost felt like duh, of course. He is hitting this like incredible pinnacle of his career. I think if you're someone who enjoys pop culture, you enjoy entertainment, you understand how the gravity of getting the Super Bowl performance, it is like a career solidifying thing if you're wanting to be like an American music superstar. And that doesn't mean you have to be an American artist to be that. Obviously, Shakira's performed, Coldplay's performed. There have been many non-US artists who have made it to the Super Bowl, but it means you've solidified yourself in the Americana pop culture, right? But I I was naive to think it would have the backlash that it did. I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, like this is a huge moment for him. It's a huge moment for the community because I would say, unlike maybe a performance of like J-Lo's in the past where it's like, yes, J-Lo is Puerto Rican and she's, she put on a very Puerto Rican performance last time she was on and she shared the stage with Shakira. Uh I would say the pride wasn't the same as we're feeling right now because Bad Bunny's been so like through every fiber of his being unapologetically putting Puerto Rico on the map and not letting anybody say anything bad about Puerto Rico. He is like, I am here. I'm here because I'm Puerto Rican. Everything about my art is literally bleeding out my love for my island and my culture. And you can't take that away from me. So I think people were more excited than maybe when J-Lo performed. Because J-Lo, at the end of the day, I think she carries herself as a New Eurekan and as like a Americana star. She's J-Lo before she's Puerto Rican. Whereas I would argue with Bad Bunny,
Hmm.
he is just as equally Puerto Rican as he is Bad Bunny.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she's not someone that's really sticking her neck out the way that other artists have. She's sort of
Hmm.
vanilla, right? We could
Yes.
swallow people can swallow that sort of Latinidad, you know?
Yes,
But
exactly.
but and then I love how you talked about how Bad Bunny has he made a political statement by choosing not to tour in the US. So I,
Correct.
I
Yeah.
remember when there was rumors that he would be performing in the show. People were like, "Oh no!" But he's purposely not being in the U.S. So there was a little bit of surprise when he was selected for this. But I think that's sort of the context, the background to some of that backlash. But what else? What else is significant? Like, why do you think there was so much backlash when you kind of extend out beyond the fact that he's Puerto Rican? That how Latinos are being vilified. What else could be behind some of that backlash?
I think it's obviously where we're at in the country right now, right? There's this huge tension with ICE. And I think, and this goes to the ignorance of a lot of people that don't sit within the diaspora, like I don't mean the Puerto Rican diaspora, but the Latin diaspora. They assume that we are all immigrants, that we all share the same citizenship status. So I think there was a lot of ignorance that people were like, well, he doesn't speak English and therefore he is not an American citizen. And therefore, why is he playing at the Super Bowl? Which is like ignorant on like so many levels. It's ignorant on his citizenship status, it's ignorant on Puerto Rico in terms of its political situation within the United States that I would argue a lot of people, even Puerto Ricans, don't full Puerto Ricans that live in the United States. I would say people in the island obviously understand, but I would say there are a lot of Puerto Ricans who are in the United States that don't fully understand the gravity of Puerto Rico's political position within the United States. And it's hard. I think it stirred something that like a lot of people did not want to acknowledge before right now. I think it just happened to be at the intersection of not only the United States war on the Latin American community and in general immigrants, and also highlighting that all the issues that Puerto Rico is facing in their unique position within the diaspora and within the United States colonial set that they have.
Mhm, mhm.
I'm curious for you, what is it that you hope to see in this performance? How do you think it'll have a cultural impact? How can it have a cultural impact?
I think the biggest thing is he will not sing in English. And I love that. I think that is so important because I think it not only highlights that Puerto Rico is a Latin American independent country of the United States to a degree, right? Obviously, in a colonial status, we are not. But this is an island that speaks Spanish. Their primary language is Spanish. These people have their own culture. There's a whole reason why he made the song Hawaii because he doesn't want us to gain statehood status and then have our culture be stripped of it like Hawaii's culture was when it became a state. So I think it's important in showcasing like what Puerto Rico really is, aka him being able to sing in Spanish, perform as his authentic self. I think that is so important. And I also think because he's already shown solidarity with the immigrant community, that it is so great to still see him not back down from performing at the Super Bowl and be like, I'm here. I am here performing in Spanish because he could perform in English, right? He has a few songs in English. He could bring on English speaking Latin artists and sing English songs. And that's where I would say this is the difference between his performance than let's say J-Lo and Shakira's performance. They sung in English. They chose to sing all English songs, even though Shakira is fully Colombian. She is a Colombian artist. She is a global Latina icon. I do not want to take that away from her. But she understood, especially at that political climate at that time, she was like, I'm choosing to sing in English. These are my English songs or my translated songs. And these are the songs I want to highlight in my Super Bowl performance, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I think given the political climate, I think it's very powerful that he's like, I'm not backing down. I will be singing in Spanish. I will be bringing on other Latin artists that sing in Spanish, and I will not falter because of what the American government is trying to villainize and fearmonger.
Hmm. Okay, one last question about Bad Bunny before I invite you to tell us about your podcast. But one question is, what do you predict? Do you think that the subtitles will say, will they be translated or will it say, non-English? Like, what are we
I
predicting for
feel
these
like
subtitles?
it'll end up being non-English and not because he wants it to be, but I do feel like it's like a little bit of an American jab on being like, we are not happy about this, you know? And they won't translate it because they
Hopefully it
don't
says
want to.
fuck ice.
Yeah, hopefully they align with us and it just says fuck ice the whole time.
That would be
That's
But
amazing.
what comes out anytime any of us are
yes.
speaking at the bottom.
Oh my God, hilarious. Okay, well, we could tell that you're very passionate and knowledgeable about Puerto Rico and your identity. So tell us about your podcast, which is coming out today. When this airs, your podcast is already out. So tell us about it.
Woo! Yes, listen to my podcast, Welcome to a Barrio, February 3rd, wherever you should get your podcast. But basically, it came out of a birth of an idea as a show that I really needed growing up, as someone who, as we had talked about at the beginning of this segment, that felt ni de aquí ni de allá. Like I was yearning for this connection with my culture and my roots because I had been so removed from it growing up, out of survival, out of assimilation, out of, what my parents and my family thought was best for their success in, the American dream. But the reality is that's not the world we live in anymore. And I am so visibly brown, I was like, I do not want to be shying away from this part of me. And so selfishly, I made the show to like interview really incredible, amazing Puerto Ricans who are pushing the culture forward, who are for liberation of Puerto Rico, and to teach me about Puerto Rican history, pop culture, news, whatever, and just be able to give these people a platform to showcase the incredible work they're doing. That's my privilege. I've been able to work in podcasting for the past 4+ years. I have been able to amass an incredible, portfolio of work, working on incredible shows like Las Culturistas and a lot of the other comedy shows on the Big Many Player slate at iHeart. But this is my chance to like take all of this privilege that I've amassed and put it out there to put other Puerto Ricans on a spotlight because, Puerto Rico didn't start existing because Bad Bunny blew up. We've been this
Right.
amazing island of culture that has been, undoubtedly a connection between the United States and Puerto Rico since Puerto Rico's colonial status within the United States. And we cannot be ignored, and Bad Bunny made that a point. We cannot be ignored. And once again, I apologize if you hear my dog whining. She gets upset
she,
anytime I'm on the
she
phone for
cannot
longer
be
than a few
ignored. She
minutes. She
cannot be
cannot be
ignored.
ignored. She's a Puerto Rican queen who cannot be ignored. But she's a dachshund, so she cannot be ignored.
Oh my God,
But
how
no,
cute.
yeah. So I'm just like so grateful to have the opportunity to do this. I've already recorded 4, 5 episodes with guests. This first episode that is out right now is more of like a love letter to why I'm doing the show and more narrative. It's just me telling my story. But don't worry, it'll get exciting the next few episodes. We have some really incredible guests coming on. The first guest episode is going to be with Jorel Melendez Barrio and his wife Aurora Santiago Ortiz, who are incredible professors, historians, authors. They teach at the University of Madison, Wisconsin, but Jorel kind of blew up a little bit in the past year because he did all the visualizers for Bad Bunny's album, all the historical visualizers, and he wrote an award-winning book, Puerto Rico and National History. And so we talked to them about, their journey with their work and also uh getting into I have a chisme corner at the end of every episode, and we use that to talk about Puerto Rico and Venezuela. Uh Obviously, there's too much to unpack in this moment, but I think it's a really great just eye opener because I think people don't realize how political Puerto Rico sits in the global spectrum, not just within the United States and their colonial status, but globally. It's been a military base. It's been used for testing, for, different bomb materials. There has been modern day birth control would not exist without Puerto Rico and the testing they did on the women. And now specifically this conversation with Venezuela. And so we as Puerto Rico are in solidarity with Venezuela. And I'm really excited for people to learn a little bit more about the connection between Puerto Rico and Venezuela. But yeah, I use the Chisme Corner to talk about current events, pop culture, politics, whatever. But they're just such great historians and amazing people to talk to that I was like, I had flown into Puerto Rico like the day Venezuela crisis happened and that the airways of Puerto Rico were closed, which is very scary. The Puerto Rican people could not
Wow.
leave or enter the island. And I had just missed like the window of closing, the 24 hours they had closed the airways. My flight was like at 5 a.m. and they had lifted the sanctions at 1 a.m. So when we recorded this the following day, it was just like a perfect time to talk about it. So I'm excited for people to hear and learn a little bit more about what's going on over there because, just because it's not the current moment we're speaking about it right now doesn't mean it's not something that is still happening in our political sphere. But yeah, I
Yeah.
really hope people enjoy it. I hope they learn something about themselves and about, Borinquen.
Yes. Okay. Well, people, you can tune in literally after you listen to this conversation. Go listen to this podcast. Becca, this was so much fun and congratulations on all your work. And we can't wait to tune in.
Yes, thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you. Take care.
Tamarindo Podcast is Brenda Gonzalez and Delcy Sandoval. We are also the show's executive producers. Karina Riverol of Sonoro Media provides production support. Jeff Ricards wrote our theme song. The best way to support our work is to rate and review Tamarindo Podcast or share an episode with a friend. Get in touch with us at tamarindopodcast.com.